Holy smokes! We got a great video for you here today. I don't care how much you know about jump starting a car, you're going to learn something new today, I promise. So here's the way we're going to do this. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to show you with a bunch of fun science experiment kind of stuff and a live demonstration on my car. So let's do this. I've been a mechanic for the last 2.5 decades, and as a mechanic, your bread and butter, your easy stuff is replacing starter motors, batteries, alternators, all that kind of stuff is the easy stuff. So when it comes to jumping a car, I know what I'm doing because I've seen a lot of this. I've had a number of times where I go to help somebody with their car and I ask them, you know, well, what's the deal? Well, the car won't start. Did you try jumping it? Yeah. And it doesn't work for them, but it works for me. I have the power. So here's how you jump start a car. You hook it up in the right order and it goes like this. It's easy to remember. Red to dead, red to donor, black to block, black to bling-e, run donor 2 minutes, start dead car, and then charge your battery fully when you can. It works for me when I go to jump it for a couple of reasons. And they're these reasons right here. I know that electrons want to run in a loop. That's what they love to do. They love to complete a, you know, they go through a complete circuit and they just run in a circle. So they want to go from positive to negative terminal and they want to do a little workout in the meantime. They got their headband on, they're ready for action. The other thing about electrons is they love clean surface area. If you have dirty battery terminals and you're trying to send electricity through that, it's not going to work. If you've got skinny little cables, it's not going to like that either. When we're talking electrons, we're talking on a microscopic, the level of an atom, that small. So we're not talking about 1 or 2 or 3 electrons just kind of trickling through, just moving through, doing some kind of a, you know, dun 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 dun, hey, dun dun. No, they're like moving like the Boston Marathon. I mean, just in huge numbers. And that's why they love lots of surface area. So you use heavy duty jumper cables and you want connection to be clean. These corrode, so you got your jumper cables and they bite into it. It's kind of got an odd color to it. You don't get very good connection through this. That won't connect at all. And that's why you have these big teeth. I mean, look at these gnarly things. I mean, they look like something you'd find on a chainsaw or something. What the teeth do is they bite down into the battery. As I go across the battery, you can see it bites through that into the raw material. That conducts electricity great. This other stuff is an insulator and prevents the flow of electrons from getting from one to the other. These are the 2 things that I know. Now here's the other thing that I know, is that anytime that there's not a clean surface area, or you don't have a lot of electron flow, you're not going to start because you don't have the amps that you need. Amps are the flow, that New York marathon of people running down the street. If you got a skinny little doorway that you're trying to get them through, meaning the little negative terminal that goes to the body mount or goes to the computer body ground, it's not going to work. You want a direct connection to the block. So here's my take or my twist, you know, as being a mechanic on how to do this. This is a starter motor, this is a battery, and these are jumper cables. What I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the circuit to get the starter moving by hooking the jumper cables to the starter. And mind you, this is exactly how the starter motor gets its ground, through a bolt into the engine block. And then there's a heavy gauge wire that goes from the negative terminal to the engine block. And then the next thing we're going to do is put the jumper cables onto the starter here. You have a heavy gauge battery cable that goes from your battery positive to the starter. In fact, if I don't know where a starter is on a vehicle and I need to change the starter, I'll just follow the cable directly from the battery to the starter and I'll be able to find it pretty quickly. So this is how the starter is hooked up in your car right now as we speak. When you turn the key, what you're doing is you're taking power from the battery and connecting it to this little post right here like this. Now notice the sparking that's happening between the screwdriver and the battery cables. Basically what happens when you hook the battery up in the wrong order, or if you don't turn the accessories off on the donor vehicle, the dead vehicle, is that you get the same kind of arcing. If there's gas fumes, if there's battery acid fumes, whatever, that can put you at risk. And that's why you connect things in the certain order that you do. Let's do it again, this is fun. So with the order of operations, a lot of it boils down, you don't even have to be an idiot just not paying attention. So here's the deal. Say we put on the negative first, and then we come in with the positive. I'm going to use a real small wire so that the damage and the flow is less. But basically, I've got this teeny tiny little target and everything's a minefield right now. Anywhere I touch, you know, on the engine block or anything, it's a minefield. If we have this disconnected, then everything's okay. I get onto this, you know, it's not as picky. And now I've got the cable in place. And I can take the negative and put it on, and I've got a big open target. You see the difference? And that's why we do red to dead. And we do the dead battery first because we're not going to arc on anything. There's no electron flow happening with the dead battery. So that's the safest thing to do first. So here's what we do. We do red to dead and red to donor. And this basically protects us from hooking stuff up wrong and sparking on something that we didn't mean to. Just like when you do any service on a car, you take off the negative battery first. If you touch the positive, say your wrench is taking this off and you touch the body and the body's hooked to ground, spark, you know, it shorts to ground and it's bad. You know, you get that heat that comes from resistance. They love clean surface areas, you know, the electrons, and if they don't get those, they throw a fit, and that fit looks like heat and burn marks. They burn stuff. Little pyromaniac trick-or-treater types. So here's the deal. If we do the red first, and we hook to the dead battery because there's no electron flow, nothing's going to spark. That's safe. Here you go, red to dead. You can remember that. The next one is red to donor, and when we hook that one up, we're just, you know, basically we don't want it to go from, you know, from red to negative somewhere else or something. So we do those, and then the next one that we do, now bear in mind all the even number ones are the donor. You see 1, 2, 3, 4 like we have here. All of the odd ones are on the dead one. Odd, dead, donor, even. Just think E, electrons. All the electrons are here. So this is bling-e, it's even. That's how you remember that. So the first one we do, red to dead. Then we do red to donor. That's number 2. Where's number 3? It's not over here. This guy's lonely. Sorry, buddy, we're not going to go with you because you're going to take through all these connections, all this corrosion, all these problems. We're going directly to the block where the starter is, and we're going to send this fire hose of electrons right to where the starter lives. And that's going to do a couple of things. You know, for one, you don't have the spark here, and you know, that's never, dude, that just doesn't happen. I mean, if you got a really screwed up, overheated battery and it's fuming, you have to have a hot fuming battery to have the fumes ignite. It has to be venting. Really hot summer day, way overcharged, you know, something to that effect. But basically, we want the fire hose of electrons where the business is. This is where the business is. So we do black to block. That's number 3. What's 4? Black to bling-e. Everything else is hooked up. We're ready to rock. So we're going to hook up the negative over here last. Once that happens, that's when the electrons really start to flow, and it's going to fill up the battery. You know, like say this is the little hose, you're going to have a little drip, drip, drip. You know, it's going to start filling up the dead battery immediately, which means this one's going to be going down. We don't want this one to go down, so we start this vehicle and we run it for 2 minutes. Voltage is like pressure. We talk about amperage and flow of electrons. That's what it is. Think of flow, you know, and when you're thinking of flow, we automatically think of water. You know, water is so much percentage of the earth, it's so much percentage of our body, you know, more than 50% of each in surface of the earth, and in composition of our body. So think of it like water. So as we're starting to fill this up and we run this for 2 minutes, we have all these electrons here that are ready to rock, and our pressure went from 12 volts to 14.5 volts because now the engine's running, the alternator's turning, and that alternator is dumping more current back into this. That's happening, this is happening, but we haven't started it yet. So just think, you're getting 2 batteries instead of just 1 battery's trying to start it through the cables. You've got all of this cableage, all of this clean surface area to get this thing going. By running it for 2 minutes, you're filling up the battery, and that does 2 things. Like I say, that's more electrons to the party when we go to start this thing. But the other thing is that when we go to start it, the battery's going to be more full. So once this vehicle gets going, alternator number 2 right here is going to kick in, and it's going to start going nuts. And it's going to do us a lot of favors to already have some electrons to use and play with and juggle, you know, as we're firing our ignition coils and doing all the things that we're doing with this one running. If we're depleted and there's nothing there and we just start it and then pull the cables off, then this thing's empty and this thing's working overtime. You ever go to Thanksgiving dinner and then one person is in the kitchen washing all the dishes and everybody else is gone? That's what this alternator is. We're going to draw another sad thing. If you don't run the vehicle for 2 minutes and fill up the electrons here and get some help, you know, basically that's the guy washing dishes after Thanksgiving. It sucks to be him. So we're going to run this for 2 minutes so that we have more juice in the battery, and then we start the car. Now when you start the car by just jumping it and this one's not running and you didn't do it for 2 minutes, it's like it turns slow, right? When you do it with just jumper cables and you don't connect here, you don't come to the party by black to block, and you connect to somewhere else, you know, like connect to the bumper or the hood or some stupid other place, it's going to have to travel from the body through a low gauge wire, a really skinny little doorway, just to get to the starter. When you do it red to dead, red to donor, black to block, black to bling-e, run donor 2 minutes, start dead car. When you do it my way, you'll find that when you start that car, it's ready to go. And we're going to demonstrate that here in a minute. When you do that and it starts up really easily, then you're not using a whole lot from here. You have more to work with, and then you're good to go. Now the last thing that I like to do is do a battery charge or a long drive when you're done. When you have this full of electrons, it saves this from getting burned. There's electrical contacts called brushes in your alternator, and there's electrical contacts called brushes in your starter as well. If you have a low amperage flow and it draws really hard, if it's pulling really hard, then it's going to burn them up. Don't try this at home, because the reason why we do it in the order we do is because if you have limited information or limited working knowledge, just enough to be dangerous, you can get into trouble. Now what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to leave these together for a long time. If you do that, stuff will just melt down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit, it's going to complete the circuit, I'm going to move through, and as I move through, it's going to break the circuit, and that amperage flow is going to be interrupted. So if you don't have good flow, you get heat, or you know, if you connect it together, it'll just melt down. But basically, watch what happens. Both of these terminals are pretty clean. There's not a lot of black marking to them. So this is kind of like on brushes and stuff. You can see, you can hear the alternator struggling. I'm abusing the alternator by just letting it run like that instead of leaving it hooked up. That's a really dumb idea to do on this car. I'm going to do it anyway. Basically, you know, to see if I have a good connection, you can get away with this pretty easily. I'm going to wait till it's not straining. You see that it got that little arc? Now when you look at the terminal here, you can see that there's a little burn mark there. There's a burn mark there, and then there's going to be a corresponding burn mark. You can see on the edge of the terminal here. So those burn marks can happen on your brushes. Where that burn mark is, these don't conduct very well anymore. They're carbonized. There's carbon in the way of the copper, and it impedes the flow or the amps. So did I kill my car by doing that? No, I didn't. Is it the end of the world? No. You know, if you hook up something backwards and it sparks and you jerk it off quick, that sounded terrible. Basically, if you have it come undone fast enough, it's not a problem. It's not going to hurt anything to do that. Now notice I have momentum so they don't get stuck. The tendency is they'll want to weld together, and that can also happen inside your starter or inside your alternator. So that's why you want to make sure that you hook up black to negative and red to positive. And the whole thing with the red and the blacks, just to keep them separate. This one runs all the way to the red, and then this one runs all the way to the black on the other side. You don't want to cross them. You can have damage to your starter and your alternator and do more harm than good if you don't do it my way. Trust me, I'm a mechanic. I've rebuilt alternators, I've rebuilt starters, I've seen these burn marks. I know that this happens. I've done it myself in my young years. I know better now, and now I'm sharing it with you. You're welcome. So the seventh thing that we do is we battery charge. Now you can battery charge by going on a long drive and letting this fill up, or you can take it home and put it on your battery charger at home. The reason why we do this is when a dead battery or a discharged battery is sitting, it sulfates. That imbalance of electrons between the sulfuric acid and the lead plates in your battery make everything groovy. It's awesome. A fully charged battery can sit on the shelf for a long time or sit under your hood for a long time. But what it doesn't like is to be halfway filled or 3/4 filled. They get a memory. So when we filled this up for 2 minutes, 2 minutes isn't long enough to fill this battery all the way back up and be sulfation proof. So basically, after you get the car going, you know, you do what you got to do, suck it up. Every time this battery goes dead for a little bit, it's bad for the battery. It does damage to some degree on the chemical level to the plates in the form of sulfation. So basically, take it home and charge it. It's all the way full. We're sulfate proof and good to go. The danger zones under the hood are pretty easy to remember. You've got a fan in the front. That's where all the airflow is. Fan front flow. You can remember it that way. So right here, on a normally mounted engine where you have the belt in the front, your same danger zone. All of this is your danger zone on this car. Some cars will mount the engine this way, transverse, and your engine will have the belts and everything on this side, or the other way. On this engine, you have the same danger area between here because that's where your belts and your fan are, and you can't even get to it because of all the shrouds and idiot hoods and everything that are in the way. So the reason why we do them in the order that we do is to avoid sparking. And one of the best things in the world you can do to avoid sparking is make sure the key's turned off on your dead vehicle. Make sure that the fan's turned off, the headlights are turned off. Make sure that there's no amperage demand or flow on the dead vehicle. That one little thing is going to prevent sparking and arcing and fumes igniting and all that kind of stuff more than anything. If the key was left on or the lights were left on, whatever made the battery go dead on this vehicle, if that's on at the time when you're hooking it up, you're going to get sparks. Jumper cables are a lot like parachutes and handguns. When you need them, you really need them. There's a difference in quality. You don't want to buy a $5 parachute. You want to spend enough money to do it right. Invest in good jumper cables. Now, what makes a good jumper cable? One of the things I like in a jumper cable is the ability to use General Motors garbage side post batteries. You got this little connection here, and then also the traditional side on the other. It's really hard to get a side post battery with this side, so they come with this one. And sometimes these reach in and get in a good, get there anyway. But you can see that they're very thick and they've got a good copper coating. Another aspect of them is that they're thick. How big's my pinky? It's almost as thick as my pinky. That's pretty good. If you have really skinny wire, let's show you what happens if you try to send a bunch of electrons through a wire that's not thick enough to handle the amps or that much flow. If we have a negative terminal here, and then the positive cable I have hooked to the skinny little wire. The skinny little wire is not going to be enough to handle. There's not enough clean surface area here. It's like a whole street full of marathon runners running down this cable and then going through a teeny tiny little doorway. Now basically with a doorway they'd break through or hurt the runners or something like that. But in this case, with electron flow, instead of breaking and knocking and bunching and smashing, it just gets hot. There's too much resistance here. So watch what happens when that gets hot. We're gonna hit the starter switch. It cooked it. Should we try it again? Woo, that gets hot. So you want to have good flow. And in order to have good flow, you need to have a lot of surface area. You'll see here that electrons love clean surfaces, lots. If you have a lot of surface area for the electrons to flow on, everything's cool. Not just like hip or popular cool, cool, like doesn't burn up and catch on fire like this did. So let's show you the proper way to jump this car. I know that there have been a lot of videos on this, but as a mechanic that's swapped a lot of engines and done a lot of wire harnesses, let me show you what really gets the job done when it comes to jump starting a car. Dead vehicle. I know it's dead because I turned the lights on and I made it dead. And now when I try to start the car, you get this. There's just nothing there. It's totally dead. Dead. Donor. So the first thing that we do in terms of connections is red on dead. Now you can remember 1 and 3 are on the dead car, and it's odd to have a dead battery. Normally your car starts, but something happened, it's odd. So 1 and 3 are always on the dead car, or the odd car. Step 1, red on dead. Step 2, red on donor. Verify red's red. That's positive. Positive's the important part. Step number 3, 3 is an odd number. This is our odd car, our dead car. We're gonna do black on block. Black on block because that's where your starter motor's gonna ground to. We want all the power from the donor vehicle to go directly as much as possible to that starter motor. That's where all the high amperage draw is. So I can't go directly to the block, there's too much in the way, but I can do to a bracket, and the bracket goes to the block, so in essence, black on block. And the last connection we'll make is black on donor, or negative to donor. Now obviously in the background you hear the diesel running. It's our donor vehicle, and this is our dead vehicle. Now what's happening is the donor vehicle's charging system is sending power not only from the battery, but it's being overflowed. We're running at 14.5 volts instead of just 12 or 13 that we would just sitting there. So our voltage is higher. That's pressure. That pressure is pushing amps through the cable into this battery, and it's filling this battery up. We're using heavy duty cables, and we've got good connections. We're connected to the engine block, or a bracket to the engine block, so that we get the best effect when we go to start it, but we also have better flow just generally through the system. So in my best Julia Child's voice, I'm going to say, allow to cook for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And that way we'll have power in this battery ready to go, but then we'll also have power coming through the cables. That's double power. Now, our battery has been allowed to cook for 2 minutes. It's time for starting. By leaving a battery in a partial state of charge or partial state of discharge, you leave it susceptible to sulfation, which basically means a bunch of white booger stuff grows on the inside of it. So what I like to do with mine is, as soon as possible, I'll fully charge it with an automatic charger that'll top it off. If you have something that can desulfate a battery, that's not a bad thing to do either. Well, there you have it. I told you what I was going to tell you. I told you, and I showed you some demonstrations. I'd like to know, what did you guys learn from this video? If there's anything that you learned, be sure to leave it in the comments below. I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. This took a lot of work, even for a simple topic like this. I'd appreciate it if you click the thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? I got a bunch more good stuff to come. Be sure to click the subscribe button. Is there somebody that you know that could use this information? Maybe it's somebody in your family or one of your friends or something. Share the video with them. The more that everybody knows, the better off we all are. Now what about taking it off when you're done? This is kind of a helpful setup because it's already here and it's very simple. So if we want to put the negative on last, we just go backwards. So we pull the negative off first, and the reason why we do that is the same thing. If I pull this off and set it on something anywhere, it can arc and spark and make a mess. So carefully put that back on, or I could set it aside. If you're careful, it doesn't matter, like I say. But if you want to play it safe, take the negative off first. Once the negative is off, I can touch this anywhere on the starter and it doesn't do anything. Anywhere on the vehicle, the body, it doesn't matter. So red to dead goes on first. Now our minefield is neutralized. We can put on the negative, and when we go to take them off, same thing. Take the negative off first, and then the positive, it doesn't matter. Do you want to see what it looks like if you do it wrong? I thought you might. All right, so we're going to take it off in the wrong order, and I'm going to demonstrate. So we've got this off. Now if I were to touch this right to the starter, it would make a big mess. We're going to use a little wire, so the little wire burns up quickly like a fuse and kind of protects it. I mean, it's still kind of scary and everything, but say if I were to set this down, take it off and put it in the wrong place, that'd be bad. So you want to make sure to take the positive one off last. So I'll carefully put it back on. Now watch what happens. I take the negative off, our minefield is disabled, and then I can do this, and everything's kosher.